Welcome to this special episode of Somatic Healing Meditations. Today's episode is all about how to heal your anxious thoughts at the roots and is a recording of a live workshop that I recently taught. In it, I teach about how to understand and shift your anxious thoughts and feelings at the roots. And during this workshop, we also do a parts work meditation for anxiety to help you experience some deep anxiety relief while growing in self-compassion and self-understanding. I've also included the question and answer portion of the workshop at the end because perhaps you have some of the same questions that the live participants did. So I hope you enjoy this workshop. It's a potent and holistic exploration of how to deepen your healing journey so that you can experience real change in your anxiety. And it introduces you to an incredibly effective paradigm of body-centered emotional healing, which I have found to be the best way to heal your core issues and make real change in your life. I want to apologize that the audio quality isn't as clear as it usually is for my podcasts. I used a good microphone, but I think because I was live streaming this workshop, the recording isn't as high quality as it usually is. Nonetheless, this is a powerful and valuable workshop, and I hope that you enjoy it. Thanks so much for being here. Now let's dive in. Welcome to How to Heal Your Anxious Thoughts at the Roots, including a parts work meditation for anxiety. I am so happy you're here. You can transform your relationship with anxiety when you learn to understand the roots of your anxious thoughts compassionately. So, we're going to be going deeper. We're going to be going beneath our thoughts and into our feelings so that we can connect with the anxious parts of our psyche deep within and make some real changes. And I'm going to start with an educational component, but we are going to be doing a full meditation towards the end of this. And in this new paradigm of self understanding that we're going to be exploring, it can really help you nourish your relationship with your inner self and deepen your healing journey. You're going to leave with a more whole and complete sense of self, as well as a whole new paradigm to work with your anxious thoughts and your anxiety. Welcome to Somatic Healing Meditations, the podcast that helps you regulate your nervous system, deepen your healing journey, and feel better in your body. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm Karenna with Hello Inner Light, and this is a special podcast episode because it's being recorded live, and we're going to be having a live question and answer session at the end. So thank you for everyone who is here live, and thank you to everyone who's listening to this on the podcast later. And in this podcast episode, you're going to learn how to uncover and understand the deep-seated causes of your anxiety. So, through parts work meditation, we're going to explore the subconscious roots of your anxious thoughts and feelings, giving you profound insights into how to shift your inner world. You'll also experience greater self compassion and self awareness. We're going to practice cultivating a deeper understanding and kindness towards yourself as you explore the roots of your anxiety. And you're going to learn a powerful mind body technique to connect with your body and emotions in a supportive way. We're really going to learn how to connect with your anxious parts in a supportive and body centered way. And this will all make sense as we move through it. If you don't know what I mean by anxious parts, you will soon. And of course, we're also going to do a parts work meditation for anxiety that will help you understand your own anxious thoughts and process some of the feelings at the roots of your anxious thoughts. And my promise to you is that we're going to explore all of this in the most compassionate way possible. So, anxious thoughts are something that many people struggle with. It's incredibly common and totally natural. You're not alone, and this is not unusual. There's nothing wrong with you. And everything I present to you during this podcast episode will be done with full respect to all parts of you. So, even your most vulnerable parts are safe to be here. And I just want to thank you again for being here because honestly, it takes courage to look at these things in a deep way. And you're showing up for yourself, whether you're listening to the recording or whether you're here live, you're showing up for yourself. So, we're going to start the educational piece now. And I want to start by just explaining to you that your thoughts are not random. So, current neuroscience tells us that 95% of our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and motivations actually originate in our subconscious. And 95% is really, really high percentage, right? Because most of the time we're just identifying with our conscious self, but that's really only a tiny portion of who we are. And our conscious self is not really in the driver's seat if it's only in control of about 5% of our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and motivations. And this is really important to understand because there's so much out there that's just telling you to change your thoughts or change your mindset. And when you begin to understand that all of that is coming from a place of just working with your conscious mind, you begin to understand why these approaches might have failed you in the past or why these approaches may have felt like they didn't really get to the depths of what you needed them to do because they're not working with the subconscious. And another point I really want to make is that we often call it the subconscious mind, but it's not only contained in your brain and nervous system. Your subconscious actually exists in every cell of your body. So we're going to be examining a very body centered way to work with your anxious thoughts and feelings. So, our thoughts are often born from forces that we're not totally conscious of, right? They're coming from our subconscious feelings, unmet needs, desires, unprocessed emotions from the past, and our nervous system state. And again, this means that we can't just change our thoughts. We have to work with the deeper aspects of ourselves in order to change our thoughts. And that may sound complicated, but it's actually the most integrative, compassionate, loving journey ever. So, I'm going to be guiding you through how to connect with these subconscious parts of your psyche in an effective, safe, and compassionate way. And even if this sounds a little bit different to you or a little bit overwhelming, just kind of take it step by step with me because this is actually the most beautiful, compassionate journey ever. So, what's contained in our conscious self? That 5% of ourself. It's who we consciously think we are. Our logic and our intellect lives here, our plans and our goals, our willpower and our ego. And these are all beautiful and important parts of ourselves, right? There's nothing wrong with any of this, except for the fact that it's not controlling most of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, right? And so we have to look a little bit deeper to understand ourselves differently and to actually shift our anxious thoughts and the other things in our lives that want shifting. Because what you'll find in your subconscious self is many things, including your inner child, unprocessed emotions, your implicit memories, which are also called cellular memories, your trauma responses and the coping mechanisms that you've come up with over time, your unconscious commitments, all of the aspects of yourself that you've repressed, rejected, or judged. And these deeply, deeply ingrained implicit narratives, which are implicit concepts and expectations of how the world works. So I'm just laying a little bit of groundwork for why we have to go deeper when we're wanting to work with our anxious thoughts and feelings, and why, when we really want to make change in our lives, we have to connect with these parts of the subconscious self. So, all of those things that I just listed are found in your subconscious, but there's something else as well. All of the aspects of ourselves that we've repressed, rejected, and judged are down there. And that actually includes big parts of our brilliance. That includes big parts of our creativity and our authenticity and our gut feelings and our inner knowing and our connection to a very true essence of us. Because oftentimes we've had to repress and disconnect from really beautiful aspects of ourselves. We've had to be inauthentic. We've had to dim our light. We've had to cut off pieces of our creativity and our inner knowing just to get by and just to fit in. And so when you move into the subconscious, which again is held in every cell of your body, you begin to reconnect with this beautiful, true, authentic essence of you. There's a deep inner wisdom within, a deep healing wisdom within. There's the intelligence of your body and your authentic self. So, as we do this work, not only are we looking to really connect with the wounded parts that need our support, but we also connect with these deeply authentic and beautiful parts as well. So, there's a lot of beauty in this journey. And so the biggest takeaways, as I'm talking about the subconscious here, are that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are largely motivated by parts of ourselves that we're not really aware of most of the time. And our subconscious mind has far more power than we generally realize. And not only are our wounds and past pains stored here, but an incredibly profound inner wisdom, intelligence, and healing potential is also hidden in our subconscious, just waiting to be reconnected with. And one of the big misunderstandings of our culture is that we just take our thoughts at face value, right? We just believe them. And this prevents us from seeing the deeper truth that's waiting below the surface. And the subconscious doesn't have verbal language like our conscious mind does. It speaks to us in feelings, knowings, images, symbols, and metaphors, which is something we'll explore in the meditation. And we must learn to listen to our subconscious to get a true sense of who we truly are and why we're really doing what we're doing and how to truly heal. And when we don't heal the wounds in our subconscious, they make themselves known, right? So they will pop out no matter what. They'll come out in emotional triggers, in pervasive feeling states like anxiety or shame or unworthiness or powerlessness. Our subconscious wounds will make themselves known through the repeating patterns in our lives, through intrusive thoughts and self sabotage, limiting beliefs, or a limited sense of self. We may feel out of control in our own lives. And of course, there are some aspects of life that are out of control, but if you always feel that way in every situation, that could be a subconscious thing. When we have emotional reactions that seem disproportionate, right? So we may not be fully emotionally triggered, but we just know we're overreacting a bit. They'll come out in projections and in bodily symptoms. So this stuff that's happening in our subconscious has deep meaning in our lives and will come out. And so we do want to learn how, in a healthy way, to drop in and connect with it. On a deep level, our anxious thoughts signal that there are parts of ourselves that are in need of our attention, compassion, and care deep within. So instead of taking our thoughts at face value, we're going to learn an effective way to see our thoughts as messengers from the deeper parts within. And this is how we make real change in our anxious thought patterns and in our lives in general. In fact, this is a big part of my story is that I was an incredibly, incredibly anxious person. I had very intense social anxiety, and also my inner voice was just cruel. Like my inner world really was filled with self hatred and self judgment at a very high level. And so I looked pretty good on the outside, I looked pretty functional, but on the inside, I just felt so much anxiety and chaos all of the time. I tried so many things, right? I tried yoga and I tried meditating and I did trauma therapy and I did all these things. And while I'm super grateful I did all of those things and all of those things benefited me in different ways, my anxiety remained really, really high until I learned this technique called regenerating images in memory, which is what we're going to use tonight for our meditation. And regenerating images in memory was finally able to help me decrease my anxiety in a significant way because it was able to take me deeper below my conscious self into my body. And it was able to help me really understand and work with the subconscious aspects of myself because there was so much held inside that was just causing me to be deeply anxious. And again, I had tried everything. I had done almost a decade of trauma therapy and EMDR, and they had helped me. It had brought down my anxiety a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. But within about 3 months of practicing regenerating images in memory, my anxiety had dropped 50% in just 3 months. And after a full decade of trauma therapy, that really blew my mind. So that's where we're going tonight. And that's why I feel so passionate about sharing this because it was such a life changer for me. And it's just a really different paradigm than we're mostly working in the self-help world. So let's talk about the hidden roots of anxiety. So, in my experience, after working with myself and hundreds of other people, there are three main causes of anxious thoughts. And this is very general. And all of these causes can be happening at the same time. Remember that we are holistic beings. And when we're working with our whole selves, when we're working with the subconscious, it's very rarely linear, right? So, all of these things could be happening for you on different levels. So, just kind of listen and tune in and see what you think. So, one big cause of anxiety is just simply that our nervous system is dysregulated, right? We can be trapped in a sort of nervous system state where it feels like there's threats all the time. And so we become very hyper vigilant, and some part of us is just constantly looking out for when is the other shoe going to drop or when is something bad going to happen. We can just, on a very simple nervous system level, get trapped in anxiousness or hypervigilance. And that's really common. In fact, pretty much everybody should probably be working on how to regulate their nervous system because it's so common and it is so powerful how we can change our nervous system when we learn how to regulate. Another really common thing that's the cause of anxiety is a buildup of unacknowledged emotions. So, when you get all of this backlog of emotions that we haven't processed, which is pretty normal in our culture because we haven't been taught how to process our emotions, that can end up just with your system feeling really, really anxious. And or if you have a real fear or resistance to feeling your feelings, which again is really common in our culture, but that creates a lot of anxiety within because maybe you'll feel angry or maybe you'll feel sad and you'll judge yourself for feeling that way. And so there's always this kind of constant judgment and suppression going on. Again, totally normal. If you're listening to this and being like, oh, I definitely do that, don't feel bad at all. You're not alone. This is what happens when we live in a culture that doesn't teach us how to process our emotions. All of these things can be worked with. And the third part, and the one that we're going to talk about the most tonight, is that there are anxious parts of our consciousness that are stuck in emotions from the past. So there are actually wounded and vulnerable parts of our inner child or past selves that still feel anxious for some reason because they were too overwhelmed at some point in the past and didn't get support. And that feeling can kind of bleed into the present moment. And we're going to talk a lot more about this. And there are two layers of processing what is going on in our subconscious. So the two layers that I talk about are the autonomic layer and the autobiographical layer. So let me explain. So the autonomic layer, the autonomic nervous system is our automatic nervous system. And when people say nervous system regulation, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about bringing our autonomic nervous system into a more balanced, flexible, and functional state. So, this is just simply the level of regulating your nervous system. And when we're regulating our nervous system, we're just creating internal safety, essentially. We are using our bodies to down regulate our brain by creating a sense of safety within, by using our bodies to tell our brain, you're safe, it's okay. That's essentially what nervous system regulation is. And this is deeply important if you have a lot of anxious thoughts, right? You're going to want to learn how to regulate your nervous system. And this is done little by little by regularly regulating. And episode 38 of Somatic Healing Meditations is a 15-minute meditation to reduce anxiety and stress. And that is a really, really powerful exercise for regulating your anxiety. So you can always go listen to that. And again, when we're working on the autonomic level, we really are working little bit by little bit. I like to think of it like flossing your teeth or like doing cardio. When you just do a little bit at a time, you get big results over time, but it really is something to invest in regularly. So, again, you can go to episode 38 of Somatic Healing Meditations, and I have tons of other regulating exercises too that I can link below of past episodes of the podcast. So that's one layer of what's happening in our subconscious is just our nervous system is dysregulated. We want to bring it back into regulation. And then the other layer is the autobiographical layer, right? And this is where we're talking about our past and our parts, and we're talking about unprocessed emotions and overwhelming things that got stuck in our nervous system long ago. And to address the autobiographical layers, we have to learn how to feel in a different way.
This is done with deeper emotional processing techniques like regenerating images and memory that I just mentioned. And these techniques help us get in touch with the emotional baggage that the subconscious parts of us are carrying. So, in everything that I do, when I'm working with my clients and my students, I'm always thinking of these two levels. And again, they're not completely distinct. They kind of bleed into one another and feed into one another and support one another because, again, we're holistic beings. And so we can't just put aspects of ourselves in boxes. It doesn't really work. But the autonomic level is just regulating your nervous system. The autobiographical level is getting to know yourself compassionately. It's reconnecting with any parts of you within that are holding on to wounds and that are feeling stressed out. It's inner child parts. It's the parts of us that are, some are the stories that we already know of things that have affected us. And some are the things, the emotions that we didn't even realize hit us so hard, but are still being held inside. And that's really where we're going with this podcast episode. We're focusing mostly on the autobiographical here to get to the roots of whatever it is in your subconscious that's causing your anxious thoughts. And so now we're going to talk about how to work with our anxious parts. So I'm going to just give a little overview of what I mean by parts work. So, the type of parts work that I really love is called internal family systems. And it was developed by a man named Dr. Dick Schwartz. And he basically created a complete model of the personality based on parts. And this intuitively makes a lot of sense if you think about it. There's nothing wrong with us having different parts. It's like part of me wants to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, and part of me wants to go take a nice walk, right? We have different aspects of our consciousness, and these aspects of our consciousness have different feelings and different motivations and different desires. And this is really, really normal. And so Dr. Schwartz says that our psyches are just naturally made up of many different parts. And some of the parts that he talks about can be broken down into two categories very generically. One are what he calls our exiles, and I call these our wounded or vulnerable parts. So, like, these are our parts that are still carrying some of the pain or the shame or the embarrassment or the fear or whatever it is, overwhelming emotions from the past that we weren't able to process, right? So, especially when we're young, we don't have the ability to regulate our emotions on our own. And so, we need a safe and loving other to help us regulate. And a lot of us were lacking that in a pretty big way when we were little. And so, we carry with us these wounds inside. And again, they can be really anything that felt overwhelming and bad, basically. And so these wounded and vulnerable parts of our psyches, they're carrying the burden of this pain with them. And sometimes that pain can flood into our present moment without us even really realizing it. Like I talked about my social anxiety earlier. When I was little, I felt shamed a lot. And so I internalized these very deep implicit narratives that A, I was worthy of being shamed, I deserved that, and B, the world was going to shame me, right? And so my little inner parts, some of my wounded parts inside, carried that with me into adulthood. And it just unconsciously flooded in when I was in social situations that A, I deserve to be shamed, and B, the world wants to shame me. And neither of those is actually true. But the little parts of me that felt such overwhelming shame when I was little hadn't been able to release or process that. And so it unconsciously was coming into my present moment and deeply affecting me, affecting my heart rate and my breath and my thoughts and my feelings and my interactions and my perceptions, right? So that's the power of these implicit narratives. So we have our exiles, although again, I call them wounded, vulnerable parts. I just prefer that, but Dr. Schwartz calls them exiles. And then we have our protector parts. And our protector parts are the parts that come in and try to keep us away from the pain, right? So one of my protector parts when I was in such high social anxiety was just avoidance, right? I just wanted to avoid. I didn't want to be in crowds. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to build relationships because I was afraid of the shame that I implicitly expected to come. So, a lot of our coping mechanisms really come from our protector parts, right? Like perfectionism, self sabotage. Our inner critic is usually a protector part, which is a little bit crazy to think of, but usually it's trying to stop us from doing anything that could be risky or where we could get criticized. It's trying to basically pull the rug out from under us before somebody else does. So, a lot of our kind of compulsive patterns that aren't really serving us in life are the work of protector parts, because these protector parts, they think they're keeping us away from pain, right? You can understand why I would think avoidance would keep me away from the shame inside. But ultimately, it wasn't really a good solution. It's not the most ideal solution, right? So, what we really want to do is we want to get in touch with these parts inside, and we want to offer them compassion and connection, because then they can let these wounds go. So, again, very generically, we have exiles and protectors inside. And then we also have our capital S self, which is not a part. It's that true essence of us. It's the authentic, true essence of who we really are that's also inside. And all of these parts of our psyche hold some piece of our wisdom and wholeness, even if their current effect on your life seems negative. And instead of getting rid of any of these parts, we want to heal and integrate these parts, because getting rid of them just simply doesn't work, right? They are actually parts of your consciousness. And so, what you want to do is you want to meet with them and integrate them and help them with their burdens and help them heal, because getting rid of them actually just creates more internal war with ourselves. And it doesn't feel good and it doesn't work. And large parts of our personality, behaviors, and motivations come directly from these subconscious parts. These subconscious parts can be extremely powerful, and they can keep us stuck and unable to make the changes that we want in our lives. And all of these parts often form during childhood. Well, not all of them, but many of our parts form during childhood. And therefore, they're working on limited information, right? The part of me that thought I was worthy of being shamed and that the world was going to shame me, it was young, it was frozen in the past. It didn't really realize that I actually wasn't getting shamed as an adult very much, not really, but it wasn't able to fact check it because it was stuck in the emotional inertia of the shame from the past that hurt so much. And our parts often think that they're helping us, especially our protector parts, but they're actually causing more problems, right? Perfectionism maybe thinks that it can keep us away from criticism, which is so painful and might remind us of our unworthiness wound deep inside, right? But perfectionism doesn't actually work, right? So a lot of our protector parts, they're trying to solve a problem, but they're doing so ineffectively and generally creating a little bit more chaos inside. So that's a very quick kind of overview of parts work. And now I want to talk about it specifically in relationship to our anxious thoughts and feelings. Often our anxiety comes directly from those wounded and vulnerable parts within that are frozen in overwhelming feelings from the past. These feelings then bleed into our current feelings and thoughts without us realizing that they're coming from the past, making us feel anxious, triggered, or out of control. And our anxious thoughts and feelings can also come from a protector part who believes that their job is to alert you to every possible danger at all times in a very hypervigilant way. So I've seen both, and it can always be both and. I mean, it could be either or as well. Again, we're all deeply, deeply unique, but we're holistic beings. And oftentimes there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that going on inside. So just breathing and noticing, does any of this make sense to you? Does any of this land? Do you feel like maybe you have some vulnerable parts or some protector parts that could be contributing to your anxious thoughts? We'll see as we do the meditation. So, we're going to move into the meditation, and the meditation is using regenerating images and memory to drop out of our heads and into these deeper parts within. And I just want to lay a little bit of groundwork of how we're going to approach this. So, there are three assumptions that we're going to make about our parts. So, your anxious part is carrying this emotion for a reason. It's not doing it to punish you, it's not doing it for any malicious reasons, but it is carrying it for a reason, usually just that it hasn't been able to let go of it. And the second assumption is that if it could have let go of this emotion already, it would have, right? Like if this part of you could have let it go, it would have. It doesn't want to hang on to the pain. And this part of you deserves compassion, love, and support. I believe that all parts of you deserve compassion, love, and support, even if they're having a negative effect on your life. So I just like to lay that out here so that we can kind of approach these parts with compassion, with some love, with some curiosity, knowing that if they could have healed this already, they would have. If they could have let it go, they would have. And I just want to give you some encouragement before we dive in. So, working with these parts is easier than you think when you learn to drop into your body and connect with these subconscious aspects of self, which I'm going to be guiding you through step by step. And most of the time, our parts just want to be seen and heard. Attuning to them and witnessing them with compassion is the most healing thing that we can do. So it's not like we have to jump through hoops. It's not like we have to figure all these things out. We just have to listen and attune and bring them some compassion because that deep healing wisdom that I talked about that we find in our subconscious, when we attune to these parts in a loving way, there's something that just naturally happens. It's like they're no longer alone with their burdens. And all of a sudden, this deep healing wisdom just comes in and things can begin to shift. So it's not that complicated. All we have to do is learn to connect and attune within. And when we understand these parts, we begin to understand our emotions, habits, thoughts, and behaviors more deeply and compassionately. And then all of these things can be shifted with much greater ease, leaving us more whole and integrated. So, a lot of my students and clients come to me and they've tried so many things, but they're still kind of at war with themselves internally, and really, this is a really gentle and integrative process because we're just coming with compassion to meet our wounded parts or to meet our protector parts within. And the compassion and the understanding really are key. And it's amazing how things can shift, how ripples into our lives come out of this really beautiful, compassionate work. And another benefit of parts work is that it gives us a bit of perspective when we see our anxious thoughts and feelings as coming from parts of ourselves, right? Instead of our whole self. So, a lot of times, anxiety just feels like it takes over our whole being, and we see the world through it and we feel it. And every part of us, our thoughts are overtaken by it, right? And when you learn to see it as a part of you that actually deserves love, compassion, and care, you get a little bit of distance. Instead of feeling fully blended with that part, we notice that there may be parts of ourselves that aren't anxious, right? And so there's a lot of different levels on which this is healing, but lots of people report that to me that one of the benefits of parts work is just noticing that it's a part instead of our whole self. Instead of being fully blended with it and seeing everything through the lens of anxiety, we get a little bit of distance and we get to learn how to take care of that part. So, just to recap, our subconscious holds far more power over our everyday lives, emotions, anxiety, thoughts, and motivations than we usually acknowledge. And there's a deep inner wisdom and vast healing potential within if we know how to access it. And to live richer, fuller, more integrated lives, we must create communication between our subconscious and conscious selves. And there's a whole new paradigm of healing and wholeness available to us. We just need an effective and safe way to utilize it. Learning to connect with your parts and your inner world in this way is an invitation to a new and deeply effective paradigm of holistic emotional healing. And if you want to learn more about this regulating body centered healing paradigm, enrollment is open for my group coaching program, Rooted and Resilient. When you're ready for deep transformation, what you really need is a practical approach to deep self healing, an easy and non threatening way to explore and transform the holistic ecosystem of your psyche. And that's exactly what you get in Rooted and Resilient. It's a 6 month group program, and enrollment is only open for a short time. And so I'll put a link below where you can find out more information if you are interested in this. And now we're going to dive in to the parts work meditation for anxiety. So go ahead and find a time and a space where it's safe and comfortable to close your eyes and turn your attention within. So, with your eyes closed, just begin to bring your awareness to your breath, noticing that you can feel the air moving in and out through your nostrils. Noticing that you can feel your chest and tummy rise and fall with every inhale and every exhale. And on your next breath, just imagine that you could breathe in through your heart and out through your belly button. Even imagining that you could feel the space or the distance between your heart and your belly button. Imagining that you could breathe in through your throat and out through your shoulders on both sides. And again, imagining that you could feel the space or the distance between your throat and your shoulders. Imagining on your next breath that you could breathe in through your right ear and out through your left elbow. Feeling the space or the distance. Breathing in through your left ear and out through your right elbow. Feeling the space or the distance between those 2 points. Imagining that you could breathe in through your knees and out through the soles of your feet. Again, imagining the space or the distance between those 2 points. And now just breathing in and out through your heart. So, as we do this meditation together, all of your answers are going to spontaneously arise from your deep inner wisdom through your imagination. They may show up as words, images, thoughts, or feelings. And you're just going to welcome whatever shows up, no matter how it shows up. And there's no way to do this wrong. So, following your next breath deep into the core of your being, just begin to bring to mind some of the anxious thoughts that you have regularly, or some of your anxious thought patterns. And as you bring those thoughts to mind, your body is going to have a reaction. And it could be anything. You might feel some tension or discomfort. You might feel some of the signs of anxiety, like butterflies or a racing heart rate or shallow breath. You might feel numbness. Again, there's no way to do this wrong. So you're just noticing whatever it is that you're feeling as you bring these anxious thoughts to mind. And where do you feel this reaction in your body the most right now? Is it more on the right or the left? Or maybe it's centralized, or maybe it's everywhere. Is it more deep or superficial? Or both, or neither? how big is this feeling within you? Like, how much space does it take up within or around you? Noticing the height, width, thickness, and shape of this feeling within. Noticing if this feeling has a color or a texture. Is it moving or still? And you might be getting answers to all these questions, and you might not. And there's nothing wrong with you if you're not getting answers. It's really important just to ask the questions and tune in. It's more important to get curious and ask the questions than to get answers. So don't worry, no matter what is going on inside. Just noticing whatever you're noticing about this feeling within. And we're going to label this your anxious part. So everything you just noticed, the color, the shape, the size, the location, this is the part of your consciousness that's at the root of these anxious thoughts. And we're going to call this your anxious part. And we're going to do some deep and gentle work with this anxious part. But before we do, your imagination is going to call forward a virtual resource to be here with you. And a virtual resource is like a guide or an angel or a friend or a kind and loving ancestor. It's really anyone or anything that is safe, loving, and powerful. So just noticing who shows up to be here with you. And if no one shows up to be here with you, just know that you're surrounded by your circle of guardians. So feeling what it's like to have your virtual resource or your circle of guardians with you. And just know that as we move forward, your virtual resource or circle of guardians can offer you support, love, protection, or clarity at any time. So taking a breath, bringing your awareness back to your anxious part. And with your circle of guardians or your virtual resource with you every step of the way, your imagination is going to take your awareness into that anxious part. It's like you become that part. You become the color and the shape and the texture. You know what this anxious part knows, and you feel what it feels. You look out through the perspective of this anxious part. And now you're going to speak as this anxious part. You're just letting your words come forward, and you're going to complete the following sentences. So, as the anxious part, you're just going to say, what it's like to be me is. Breathing and feeling and going even deeper into the anxious part. Speaking as the anxious part, you're just going to let your words come forward and complete this sentence. What I'm struggling with deep down is. Breathing and feeling and going even deeper into your anxious part. Letting your words come forward, you're just going to finish this sentence. What I'm really afraid of is, or what's most vulnerable to me is. Breathing and feeling, speaking as your anxious part. You're just going to say, what I see when I look at the world is. Breathing, letting your words come forward, speaking as the anxious part. You're just going to say, what I really want or need is. Breathing and feeling, speaking as this anxious part. You're just going to say, how it feels to say all of this is. And then just speaking anything else that wants to be spoken from this anxious part until that feels complete. When that feels complete, your imagination is going to take your awareness out of this anxious part and back into your whole self, back into the wholeness and totality of you. Instead of just being this one part, you're now all parts of you. And as your whole self, you're just going to look back at the anxious part and receive a stream of colored energy from the anxious part, representing everything the anxious part just shared. Noticing the color and the quality of this stream of colored energy. And noticing where in your body you receive this energy first. Just fully receiving all of the energy from your anxious self. And if you have the instinct to filter some of this, maybe your virtual resource or circle of guardians could help you. But generally speaking, you're receiving everything that your anxious part just shared. Now, as your whole self, you're going to speak back to your anxious part. And you're just going to say, anxious part, what I heard or received from you is. Breathing. And again, you're speaking as your whole self back to the anxious part. And as your whole self, you're just going to say, anxious part, how it feels to hear or receive this from you is. Breathing, being your whole self, letting your words just come forward as you speak as your whole self back to the anxious part. You're just going to say, anxious part, what I want to tell you is. And again, speaking as your whole self to the anxious part, you're just going to say, anxious part, what I understand now that I didn't understand before is. Breathing and feeling and being your whole self. Speaking as your whole self back to your anxious part, you're just going to say, anxious part, how it feels to say all of this to you is. And now just speaking anything else that wants to be spoken from your whole self to your anxious part until that feels complete. Breathing. When that feels complete, your imagination is going to take your awareness back into the anxious part one more time. And the anxious part may have changed a lot, or it may be exactly the same from the beginning, but you're just going to become that anxious part again, becoming the color and the texture and the shape, or whatever it is that you've noticed about it. You become that anxious part. And as the anxious part, you look back at your whole self and receive a stream of colored energy from your whole self, representing everything your whole self just shared with you. Noticing the color and the quality of that stream of energy. And as the anxious part, noticing where you receive that energy in your body first. fully receiving all of that energy from your whole self. And now you're going to speak again as the anxious part back to your whole self. And you're just going to say, whole self, what I heard from you or what I received from you is. Breathing and feeling, speaking as your anxious part back to your whole self. You're just going to say, whole self, how it feels to hear that or receive that from you is. Breathing, speaking as your anxious part back to your whole self. You're just going to say, whole self, what I want to say to you is. And one more time, just speaking anything else that wants to be spoken from your anxious part to your whole self until that feels complete. When that feels complete, your imagination is going to take your awareness out of the anxious part and back again into all parts of you, back into the wholeness and totality of who you are. And as you land in your whole self, just notice what feels different. Now that you really connected with that anxious part, you got to know it. What has shifted in your feelings? And what looks different to you now? What do you understand now that you didn't understand before? Just taking a moment to really feel what has shifted within. And just know that any realizations that you had or any shifts that you experienced are now a part of you. They're a part of your body and your heart and your mind. And as you walk forward in life, you will feel different. Taking a breath, just ask your body if there's anything else it wants or needs before we bring this to a close. And just listen to any answer your body gives you. There may be something that it wants you to take care of right now. There may be something it wants you to take care of later, or there may be nothing, nothing at all. Now, when you feel ready, your unconscious mind is going to let you know that all of this has been fully integrated into your cellular memory and emotional memory by bringing full feeling and weight back into your arms and legs, fingers and toes, and spontaneously opening your eyes. Great work. So, how was that for you? What shifted inside? And what do you understand now about your anxious thoughts and your anxious part that you didn't understand before? Go ahead and really thank yourself for doing this, for showing up for yourself in such a deep and beautiful way. And for everyone here live with me, if you'd like to put any questions or comments in the chat, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear if you have any questions about anything I mentioned throughout this whole podcast episode, or if there's anything that you want to share. And just as a reminder, Rooted and Resilient is open for enrollment for a short time. So if you're ready to heal your core issues from the roots and transform your life from the inside out, please check it out. All right. Marla says, I see the anxious part as a little me that remembers being anxious. Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love that you could envision or connect with that little you that remembers being anxious and also not sure how to answer some of the questions. Yeah, that's really good feedback. And I'm glad you said that because it's actually really, really normal. So, this process is a little bit strange because, like I said, our subconscious doesn't have language. And so we kind of go between feeling and images and words. We're creating a bridge between our conscious mind and our subconscious mind, but we won't always have words because some of it's just on a feeling level or some of it's just kind of hard to tune into. But the practice of trying to come up with the words, and I don't mean trying like trying really hard or efforting, by asking the questions and letting your words come forward when they come forward is great. There's no way to do that wrong. So, no worries. I'm glad that you even just asked the questions. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, Susan says, wow, thank you. I found a friendship that I can collaborate with by listening and giving space for my anxious self. Yes, that is so beautiful. That's kind of how my inner world feels now too. It just feels like all these parts who love each other and have each other's back. Like, I talked earlier about how I had such high social anxiety and such high self-hatred. And now my inner world is like this mushy love bug fest, which is so nice because the world is harsh enough, right? Life outside of my insides is stressful and harsh enough. And so it's so wonderful to have this internal friendship, this internal relationship. And I just love that internal feeling of like all of my parts are welcome here. And I feel love even for the anxious parts or even for the uncomfortable parts. Lizzie, I get frustrated because my westernized mind jumps in and tells me I'm making things up. Totally, totally. And that's actually another part. And just like all parts, we have love for it because it thinks it's helping you. I think maybe it thinks it's keeping you in this box so you're not strange or crazy or weird, or I don't exactly know. I can't explain your parts to you, but that part could explain itself to you. So see if even though it's frustrating, and you can also honor the reality of like, oh, it's frustrating because my mind keeps telling me I'm making it up. You could also honor that. Oh, what does that part want or need? What is that part feeling? It's probably kind of trying to keep you in a particular box or whatever. In fact, that's a lot of times what our protector parts are trying to do is they're trying to keep us within the bounds of what we think will either be the least painful or get our needs met the most. And a lot of times that's the bounds of our families or our school systems or our communities, right? That's what our protector parts are often trying to do. And ultimately, that's not serving us. And it's actually really painful, but it's understandable that they're trying to do that because they think that that's how they can protect us best. And you don't protect something that you don't care about. So it, in a weird way, actually comes from a place of care. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad that makes sense. You overanalyze everything all the time. I get it. I totally get it. Yeah. Yeah. I think your overanalyzer is just a part as well. And overanalyzing also responds really well to regulation as well. So, like I mentioned, the autonomic and the autobiographical levels, you can check in with both of those with your overanalyzing part. Susan, how does this work with shadow work? So, this essentially is shadow work, right? Because everything that they talk about in shadow work is connecting with your subconscious self. It's going beneath our conscious mind, which again is only about 5% in charge of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and connecting with this deeper, fuller, richer sense of self. And in shadow work, they talk about the shadow as sort of like the quote unquote negative things or the things that we rejected or repressed, but there's actually all this beauty too. But this is essentially completely synonymous with shadow work, and this is one of the most effective ways I've ever seen for doing shadow work. Yeah. Tessie says, I see my little self really alone and afraid, adult me and others holding her and telling her, you are safe. But yes, there is a part that says, this won't work. Yeah, and that's totally fine. So basically, I mean, I don't know, Tessie, I can't say because I don't know what your history is, but this might be one of the first ways you've connected with yourself in this deep way. And so trust is built over time. Relationships are built over time. Love is built over time through understanding and attunement and togetherness. And so maybe you won't trust yourself the first time or even the first 12 times, and there's nothing wrong with that. I like to say in this work, there's no wrong way to feel and there's no wrong thing to feel. So yeah, so the more just accepting you can be of the part that thinks that it's not going to work, that's okay because you can build trust, you can build a relationship. But if you haven't done it a lot of times before, there may not be trust. And again, that's normal because trust is built through knowing that you're in a relationship that's safe, knowing that you're in a relationship with someone who's listening to you or who cares about you. And that's true of our internal relationship as well. Yeah. And also, Tessie, I just want to say I'm really glad you could even see her alone and afraid. Even that the fact that she showed you that actually says something to me that she trusts you to some degree. So it's actually really beautiful. Rose, do you have a reference for regenerating images in memory as a resource as you referenced Dr. Schwartz for IFS? Yeah. So, regenerating images in memory is created by Dr. Deb Sandella, and her website is riminstitute.com, RIM, because that's regenerating images in memory. And she is a brilliant woman in Denver. She's my teacher, and I feel so lucky to have learned from her. She's the one who created this, and she's just completely fantastic. But yeah, she has a book called Goodbye Hurt and Pain. She has a website. You could certainly look her up. She's awesome. I love her so much. All right, Susan said, yes, it feels more compassionate than the shadow work I've done previously, even though it was good. Yeah, yeah. To me, the compassion is everything, honestly, because I've tried fighting against myself. I did for many, many years. And the compassion is what has actually created change, like actually created the changes in my life that I want. So that's big for me. Christine, my anxious self and my whole self feel separate and vulnerable. Yeah, my whole self doesn't know if we can carry the weight of the anxious self. Physically, I feel really cold and teary. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's really understandable that your whole self doesn't know if you can carry the weight of the anxious self. And ultimately, sometimes when we get in touch with these parts, we'll initially feel a little bit worse because we have been kind of ignoring the weight of that anxious self, right? We've been carrying it, but we haven't been consciously attuning to it. Because a lot of us are kind of avoidant or dissociative, which again is totally normal. Those are protector parts, and there's nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing wrong with us for being dissociative or being avoidant. But sometimes part of the journey when we connect with our bodies is that things feel a little bit heavier or a little bit harder when we first come into connection with it. So, Christine, maybe you could just do some havening with that weight. I have a ton of podcast episodes. Again, I would recommend podcast episode number 38, but maybe just do some havening, feel the heaviness, and see if you can move into a place of compassion for that too, because it is pretty complicated. Like we just did a pretty simplistic, like whole self talks to a part and they talk to each other, right? Which is great, basic, wonderful exercise. And we are holistic beings and we're a little bit more complicated than that. But I really want to validate you for even going there and feeling that. Because, like I said, even when it feels worse initially, what we're doing is we're being more honest with ourselves and we're acknowledging what's really happening inside. And we can't actually heal until we acknowledge what's truly happening. So you're acknowledging it, and I validate you for that, but I'm sorry that it's hard right now. Yeah. And Tessie says, "Thank you." Tessie says, "I have to go, but thank you. I've been listening to your podcast. I wait for the info of your program." Awesome. It was challenging to keep the anxiety beast so close rather than pushing away. Yeah, totally, Kirsten. That actually is really, really common because our knee jerk reaction is to move away from pain. We're even biologically programmed to move away from pain, even emotional pain. So we want to push away. And the pushing away, I have found doesn't really work, right? Because there's no away for it to go. And it takes a lot of energy to push it away. A shadow work metaphor that people have used before is it's kind of like holding a beach ball underwater trying to push natural parts of you away, right? It takes a ton of energy and eventually it just squirts out sideways, you know? So in the regenerating images and memory way, we move towards with acceptance and compassion. And almost always that really helps us get a handle on what's going on inside. But yeah, I totally get it. One says, "My wounded parts feel much safer to be seen when they're not called exiles." Yeah, being called an exile has that part going into exile and survival mode. Totally. Totally. Yeah. Everybody's very different with how words land with them, but really feel how words land with you because that's meaningful information. That's really great. I'm glad you had that insight. And thank you for sharing. Yeah. Right. Kirsten says pushing away has not worked. Not at all. Got it? Yep. Me too. Marla says, thanks. Good night. Kirsten says, wow. Yeah. Well, you guys had some really beautiful awarenesses open up, it sounds like, and maybe some difficult ones too. And again, I just like honor your courage for even going there. Our inner world holds so much, and it's such a treasure trove of wounds and wisdom. And all parts of ourselves, I believe, deserve to be known and deserve to be loved. And you tried that tonight, and you did it. So I just want to validate you. Aw, thank you for your gentle wisdom, says one. You are welcome. All right, that is it for tonight. Thank you again for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you would subscribe to this podcast and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or rate it on Spotify. And don't forget to join me every Friday on this beautiful journey out of your head and into your more embodied and authentic self.